talking to book people about books and other stuff.
Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Talking to Book People about books and other stuff, in which I chat with Owen Sheers, novelist, playwright and poet, and most recently author of To Provide All People, an incredible narrative poem that is all about the NHS and in the voice of the NHS, which was an important project when it was completed for their anniversary a couple of years ago, and now feels even more important and even more resonant with everything that's going on. So I'm going to talk to Owen about that, about lockdown, about reading, about writing, about what he's been up to. Now, I recorded the interview 2 days ago, and at the same time I recorded an introduction, but unfortunately that introduction had appalling squawky sound that you do not want to listen to. So I'm re-recording the introduction now, and I'm not faking it and pretending that I'd recorded it at the time, because I now have significantly less facial hair than I did back then. So there's just no covering it up. Let's pretend for a moment that I'm quickly going to add some more facial hair on and change my shirt and then give a call to Owen Sheers. So thank you anyway for agreeing to have a chat. And where do we find you? Where do we find you? Where have you managed to be at home for this?
I don't know how much you can see out the window, but
I can see green.
Yeah,
the sunshine.
Well, we're in the middle of the Black Mountains at home, which obviously, in this situation, you realise, that the privilege and the luxury of space is the new hierarchy of wealth, isn't it? And I mean, of course, in many quarters of the world, that goes hand in hand, especially in cities. But suddenly, never has a more rural setting felt, more advantageous. So it's something that we've been very aware of. We've got 2 young children, 2 and 6 years old.
Yeah.
And we've got friends with kids of similar ages in like 1 or 2 bedroom flats with no outside space. So we're at home and we feel very lucky.
There was that weekend, when everyone rushed to the National Trust places because the National Trust, and it was almost like people were sort of putting their towel down on bits of the countryside. Well, I'll take the Cotswolds.
But I think actually that weekend started a fascinating ongoing process or an ongoing conversation about second homes and what is the relationship of second home owners to the places in which their homes are set. Yeah. And ideas of, belonging, and also a concept of how reciprocal should that relationship be. We've known for years that there have been concerns about second home owners not actually contributing into the communities that they're in. And suddenly that was writ large. It's like, no, actually don't come to your second home because we've got pretty sparse rural services anyway. Yeah,
exactly.
But I guess that's what's fascinated me about the whole coronavirus is that it's pulled together, multiple strands of issues and conversations that I think we're long overdue having anyway.
Do you think already you're seeing any positives, from those conversations that might actually stand the test of time?
The most evident one has to be, how will this affect, or how will this current situation be able to be positively harnessed in terms of finally waking up to the challenge of the climate crisis? That's the big one. Much, much bigger than COVID-19. That's the one that's going to get us as a species. But I think, almost every project I'm working on at the moment in some way relates to the climate crisis. And one of the biggest obstacles in the conversations we're having at the moment is, turning people's heads and governments' heads around to the idea that there needs to be ingrained, deep cultural change and deep adaptation. And you quite often get a pushback of the economy can't take it, we can't take it. And this moment, I think, has shifted. It shifted the whole window. So actually, look what we can do.
In a very short time.
As a species. Yeah. And it's also, look what governments can do when they communicate a clear and present danger. And that's where I think, storytellers have a huge role to play with the climate crisis, because it is a clear and present danger, but it's been a failure of narrative, and governments haven't been communicating that. Yeah. So that's one big positive. I think, communities are very much discovering themselves again. Yeah. Again, we live in a very small community, a village. It's been extraordinary. Really. And I think all of us, even just on the level of a family, are thinking, actually, these things that we're really valuing and really enjoying in this time, how can we keep hold of that and sort of carry it through to after this. So yeah, I hope that there are positives. Yeah. I've been talking to a few people about, is this going to be a post First World War moment when actually the world just wanted to go back to normal? Yeah. Or is it going to be a post World War II moment when people realize we have to be in a different way? We need systemic change. And I kind of hope it's the latter.
I mentioned when I emailed you to see if you could do this, about to provide all people. It started as a film, right? I mean, tell people a little bit about it, because that's the one bit of sort of book event I'd like out of this chat. I mean, it was timely anyway, because it was done for an anniversary of the NHS. But now I'd be just fascinated to hear what your thoughts on it looking back as well.
It came about because I wrote a film poem to mark the anniversary of the Aberfan disaster at the BBC, and I kind of for that, which, as you can imagine, was an incredibly difficult project to take on. Yeah. And so I went back to and explored a form that I'd used before in a work called Pink Mist, which was both a book and on the stage, and so a kind of verse drama. Yeah. But something that begins with documentary interviews. And so I interviewed people in Aberfan, and I wrote a poem. The attempt was to write a poem in the voice of Aberfan. So kind of this choral experience. Yeah. But made up of lots of individual experience. And the BBC were pretty nervous, the whole kind of, does it have to be in poetry thing? Yes. That's part of how it works. Yeah. But I'm pleased to say that it did work. And so I saw that there was a narrow window of opportunity to try this again on TV. Yeah. And so I had a conversation with them, and the 70th anniversary of the NHS was coming up. And I said, let me at it. I know exactly what I'll do. Yeah. I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. No. Except that I wanted in some way to harness this form that begins with documentary interviews. I then create composite characters who speak in a form of dramatic verse monologue underpinned by rhythm and rhyme. But of course, the challenge with the NHS is that my previous projects are using this form had been events, so it could be structured around, before, during, and after. And suddenly, the more I read, the more I interviewed people. I did around 75 interviews. I thought, oh my God, this is a film about an idea. So it was that I was wrestling with for a long time. But in the end, that kind of gave the structure to the piece. Okay. So it was written for TV, but I worked with a very enlightened and lovely filmmaker, Pip Broughton, who basically said, write your book and I'll adapt it. Right, so I'm always kind of writing it with more of a literary sentiment, I suppose. But so in the end, it's 3 acts, in a way, the essential 3 acts of all of us, birth and life and death. Yeah. And across all of those, I'm trying to run in parallel the story of the NHS, the story of its birth, which, as I came to find out, was much more difficult than I even realised. And that is run alongside real contemporary, more intimate stories. Yeah. So in that case, of a real difficult birth. And then by the end, of course, when I was making this, death was around palliative care and those kind of stories. And the big overarching story is the NHS going to survive? Yeah. And I suppose that's, to come back to your question, that's what was so interesting. I asked everyone who I interviewed, in 10, 15 years' time, will the NHS still be here, as we understand it, being true to its remit? And it split exactly 50-50. Really? 50% of the people said no. One of the most common phrases was, it'll be a logo. And of course, this also differs over the country. NHS England is very different from NHS Wales and NHS Scotland. So I suppose, coming out of writing to provide all people, I was aware of the creeping privatisation, the systemic underfunding, the potential horrific damage that Brexit could do to it. And I suppose it's all of that I'm carrying into this period. And I'm just watching as that understanding of what the NHS is and why it is different, but also how badly it's been treated, is kind of spreading across our population now. Yeah. And I think it's extraordinary. I think maybe it's something that the NHS needed, and that I can't believe after this it's going to be as badly treated as it has been for the last 15 years. You can't imagine the public allowing that now. Anybody, just because I think even though everyone knows, or a lot of people knew about exactly, what it stood for and what it could be, I just feel that from this event,
it's just so much higher on people's agendas. You know, they're just sort of, they just seem more, I think that people will be more willing to go into bat for it. When writing to provide all people, I'm really interested in the method that you use. Just to ask one question about the actual writing, because you said you actually interviewed sort of 75 people, and it's so it just gives you that sort of, as you said, it's like a combined voice, but it's also these very, very personal stories. Is it very rewarding as a writer to do that, because you're kind of giving voice to these people, and it must be an interesting balance of kind of catching exactly their voice, but also you have to actually reframe it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you're talking about voice, because the whole form for me, is born of voice and is about voice. And to quote David Jones, when he sat down to write in parentheses, and he said, "I sat down to try to make a shape in words." That's what I have in my mind when I'm working in this way. Is that it's my duty as the writer to make a shape of all these voices in such a way that it can be held and carried on and shared. And it's interesting because you talked about that you have to give voice, but also because of the poetic element, you're given a certain lyrical license, which is about grafting your own voice onto others. But I suppose that's why I tend to create composite characters, even though sometimes these composite characters something they say might very closely align to someone. But I'm always very careful to say in my interviews, look, something that you tell me, an experience you have, might pop up in the mouth of someone who is a different gender and 20 years older. Because what I'm asking people to do is to add nuance and detail to a general story. People open up because there's a degree of anonymity in it. And actually everyone who has a specialism or a specialist experience wants it to be better understood in the wider world. So in terms of being a rewarding form, it's incredibly rewarding. It comes with a huge duty of care and a lot of anxiety. But I partly started writing in this way because I think I might have spoken about this when I came to your shop. But, for whatever reason, I found myself asking a lot, how does a writer put their shoulder to the wheel? What's the contribution? It's going back to the bardic idea of being a conduit for the voices of others and the stories of others. So my starting point is absolutely that, that documentary interview. But every time I've worked in this way, it's interesting. The final speeches are comprised of ideas and images that no one has said to me. They're almost entirely my own.
Right.
There is no way that I could have written them without doing those interviews.
No, I bet. Well, that's interesting. It's so interesting way to do it. How has this affected you, this whole situation from a writing point of view? Are you busy writing at the moment?
I think, like so much of what everyone's experiencing at this time, it's such a braiding of different, the world has slowed, commitments have fallen away. I'm noticing nature in a degree that I just hadn't before. I thought I always had paid close attention. I'm also experiencing my family in a different way, which is wonderful. But my writing time has done this, because my wife and I, we split the working week cleanly down the middle. So, okay, I get 2.5 days a week. That's a lot less than I would normally get. So it's interesting, actually. I've been writing individual poems, lyric poems. Wasn't expecting to do that, but maybe it's a time that suits that. And I'm approaching the third novel.
Right.
But what I was going to write has been derailed by this because it was reliant upon some foreign travel and some research.
Right. You have always sort of not quite alternated, but you move around, right? I mean, you would not be the kind of author that someone can sort of say, right, okay, I'm going to wait for Owen to write his next 3. I'm going to read his series of 5 novels or something like this, because it's gone. It could be drama, it could be narrative poems, lyric poems, novels, everything.
Well, that's nice of you to say that, because I love it, but I'm aware that, commercially, disastrous way to go. And I've had so many people, people sort of quite like to know who they're reading in Britain. They like to know that you're a novelist or you're a poet.
Listen, what about reading? While you've been, again, in the last few weeks, or has it changed your reading? Have you done much reading? What are you enjoying at the minute? Or if you've done nothing, what were you enjoying
as much
before?
reading? There was there was a recent sunny day when the girls were in the paddling pool sufficiently enough for me to read an entire a novella, which is called Sisters by the American author Lily Tuck. It's fragmentary. You just get these little glimpses of narrative. It's got a very strange kind of tone to it, and I loved it, actually. I really enjoyed it. But I think it's a time to go back to stuff, isn't it? So I've given myself the task of I'm hoping to read one book of the Odyssey every week.
Right.
I'm on book 2.
Okay.
That's the Robert Fagles translation.
Yeah.
Fagles, thank you. I've just started. I've never read Tender Is the Night, so I've been reading Tender Is the Night.
Great.
I'm part of a writers' book group. So we did the summer book just recently. Tove Jansson. That is a great book for this moment. If anyone's looking for something to read, I mean, don't you think? Just full of depth and humour and lightness and the best of life. And lastly, for some reason, I've gone back to Carol Ann Duffy's selected Sylvia Plath, but really enjoying that as well. I love that. And I think for this moment, the American poet Wendell Berry and Penguin brought out a lovely selection of his work recently, The Piece of Wild Things. There's poem after poem in there that speaks to this moment, speaks to this spring and the natural world and to the human moment, I think.
When this is all over, if this were to just end in a nice, clean and sudden way, which it won't, but if it were, where would be the place you'd most look forward to sort of stepping into in a kind of normal world? Oh,
that's such a good question. I'm probably going to give you several. I've got a part-time post in Swansea University. It might sound quite strange to say work, but what I love about that is that I drive from here, the Black Mountains, right over the top, past wild ponies and sheep and extraordinary landscapes, and I drop down into Swansea, and I just love walking onto that campus, because you walk through this beautiful park and you walk onto the campus and suddenly it's multi-ethnic. You hear 6, 7, 8 different languages. You sit down for a coffee talking about physics, and it's just sort of, I haven't had a post there that long, and it's just sort of reminded me and reignited me and what extraordinary places universities are. Incredible. So on the one level, there's that. Yes, my local bookshop, which also has a lovely cafe. What I really want to do is that I was hoping this spring to start a very long project. Who knows how long it'll take, but which is basically to walk around Wales. So to walk the coastal path first and then Offers Dyke.
Right.
Do it in 2 or 3 day chunks.
Yeah.
I've thought about this quite a lot now.
Yeah,
so camp on the first night, a wild camp on the first night.
Yeah.
Stay in some really nice gastropub on the second night, because I'm quite old now.
Yeah.
And probably only do sort of 2 or 3 sections a year.
Yeah.
But each time take a different couple of friends.
Yeah.
People who maybe haven't met each other before.
Great.
Who may not get on, but hope that they will. And I think, God, that would probably take me, I don't know, depending on how far we walk each time, at least a good 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was going to start that this spring and summer. So once we can, I want to choose my 2 friends and do our first sort of 2 or 3 days, start off on the coastal path. Although I was going to say it's awful, as a writer, you keep thinking, is there a book in this? And I sort of want to do this without thinking that. Yeah. But at one point when I did think, because I wrote a little pamphlet called The Men You'll Meet. Well, actually, it's called Letter to the Future. So I write a letter to my daughters, and the wonderful Laura Bates writes a letter to her daughter. It's about, the future of sexual equality, and in my case, the idea of reforming masculinity. Yeah. So I did sort of wonder if this walk around Wales could be an extension of that. And if I did, if I were to take 2 male friends each time, could it be sort of an investigation of where we are with that question, and probably how far we have to go.
Yeah. So it might
both be literally and in terms of masculinity.
Yeah. You may, depending what you discover, you may fray a few friendships along the way. Well, listen, thanks for taking the time to have a chat. It's fantastic. Yeah.
And also I did want to thank you because it was at your bookshop that I got to meet the bookshop band. And the song that they wrote as a result of Saw a Man
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, so do you know they began with us and everything, and they were our kind of house band and everything. Now they're living up in Wigton in Scotland. They're playing a live lockdown gig Friday night on our Facebook page. If you go to our Facebook page or their Facebook page, it's a 45-minute show, and it's at 8:30, and it's just the two of them sat there playing 5 or 6 songs, and you can see it's great watching because there's a mixture of loads of booksellers from around the country and a few authors kind of watching in. It's like they're getting like 400 people watching, and it's
wow,
really,
that's great.
It's really sweet.
I will definitely try to make that tonight.
All right, well, I'll pass your best on to them as well. I hope to see you on the other side in Bath.
Hope so, Nick. Okay, all the best.
Cheers, Owen.
Bye.
Bye.
Please note, no book people were harmed in the making of this film, though some were technologically challenged. All books are available from www.mrbeesemporium.com.
Keep safe and keep reading.